Let's get more perspective now from Ronald Chapman. He's a legal analyst and federal defense attorney, and he joins us now from Lexington, Kentucky. Ronald, thanks as always for your time. Let's start with the classified documents case here. The Justice Department asked for a December trial date, but the Trump team wants an indefinite delay with no specific start date, which is, of course, up to Judge Eileen Cannon, who Trump appointed to the seat while president, to now decide that. What do you see happening here?
Well, the prosecutors pushed back very hard here. Trump almost wanted to set sort of an indefinite trial date in this case, and the prosecutors filed an 11-page response to that, discussing the Speedy Trial Act, which is what applies here, and arguing that the public interest would not be served by this sort of indefinite extension that Trump seeks. In addition, they cut back at some of Trump's arguments about the volume of discovery in this case and the fact that classified material needs to be reviewed. In the end, I think Trump will be able to get some delays, but it won't happen with this motion. I think the judge will set an earlier trial date, and Trump will have to find reasons to kick that down the road later on in order to meet his aims of pushing this past the election.
And when this first broke, many experts agreed the special counsel's case did seem pretty strong against the former president. All of the photos and the evidence that, the American public could see. Has anything caught your attention since then or given you a different perspective on what Trump's defense might be at this point?
No, I think it's still really a strong case for the prosecution here. Trump's only claim, especially given the audio that has been introduced or will be introduced at trial, his biggest claim has been this supposed declassification defense, that he had the ability to declassify even though he didn't expressly do it. He can't be charged for this because it was declassified. Listen, I think this defense doesn't work, and this case lives or dies at jury selection. I think the best thing Trump would be able to do is, with that South Florida jury, getting a few sympathizers who may never convict him even if the evidence was so strong. And that's what we call in the legal field a jury nullification defense. Despite the fact that there's evidence of a crime, the jury simply won't convict. Now, jury nullification defenses aren't technically allowed in federal courts, but there's ways that attorneys can argue for them even if they can't explicitly say they want a jury nullification defense.
Interesting point there. And yes, certainly going to see how that all unfolds and if it unfolds before the election or gets pushed. Shifting to Georgia, and speaking of elections, Trump's lawyers are looking to challenge the Fulton County, Georgia investigation into efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Do those challenges have any chance at succeeding?
I'm not so sure that they do. We know that they Trump's team filed in the Supreme Court recently to try to block the grand jury investigation in this case, citing a whole number of issues that we probably don't need to go into now. The reality of this is that the grand jury process is largely secret, doesn't offer very much protection for defendants. And at the end of the day, if a grand jury chooses to indict, which we expect that they will in Georgia within the next few days or potentially weeks, if a grand jury chooses to indict, there's very little that a defendant can do to stop that. They don't need a majority, and it appears that the grand jury will come back, and Trump may face that third case down in Georgia.
And the Fulton County investigation has so many key players involved. As a defense attorney, who in Trump's orbit would you be concerned about potentially flipping on him?
Well, we've heard some reports that Rudy Giuliani may be talking. We've heard some reports that Kushner may be talking. I think he was likely talking to the federal government. We do have that recording of the phone call between Trump and some other Republican officials that seem to be very problematic. I'm not so sure who's cut deals and who would be flipping, but I don't know that Donald Trump can look around him right now and see that he has too many friends in terms of defense witnesses who would be able to get on the stand and help him out. I think I'd be very concerned about people from his inner circle in the campaign who would be able to get on the witness stand and reiterate statements made by Donald Trump that specifically indicate that he knew he didn't win the election, but tried to find a way to suggest he did. That has huge implications for both the Georgia investigation as well as the January 6th investigation that is ongoing. And I imagine those prosecutors are probably talking to each other.
And do you see an indictment coming down in the DOJ investigation as well?
That is going to be a much tougher case. We know special counsel's already landed an indictment down in Florida. The question is, do they open up this huge can of worms that is January 6th? I've always maintained that Trump's best defense to the investigations that he's facing is the January 6th case. That case becomes a little bit less clear. Let's look at a few facts here. First, we have protesters, as you can see on the screen right there, who took it upon themselves to go in there. The government is going to have to indicate that Donald Trump incited them to do that. That's where this case gets very tricky. Did Donald Trump's words, were they made with the purpose and the effect of causing people to go in the Capitol that day? That is a much tougher sell for a jury, even if it's a more friendly jury up in Washington, D.C.
Federal Defense Attorney Ronald Chapman, thank you so much for your time and insight. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you.